I'm writing this from a motel room 3 towns over. My hands are still shaking so bad I can barely hit the keys, but I need to get this down while the memory's still sharp. If you're listening to this and you live in the rural Midwest, specifically near the Ozark line, check your pets. If you see a stray cat that looks a little too long, a little too thin, don't feed it. Don't let it in. Just run. It started about 2 weeks ago. I had moved back to my grandfather's farm to help him out. Pop is in his 80s, stubborn as a mule, and refuses to sell the land despite his arthritis making it impossible to manage the herd. It's an isolated place, miles from the nearest paved road, surrounded by dense, encroaching woods that always feel like they're holding their breath. The first few days were normal. Hard labor, fixing fences, feeding the few head of cattle he had left. But on the 4th night, the silence of the farm broke. I was sitting on the porch, nursing a beer, when I heard a sound coming from the edge of the tree line. It sounded like a cat in heat, that low, guttural yowl that sounds almost like a crying baby. But there was something wrong with the pitch. It was deeper, vibrating in a way that made my teeth ache. My grandfather's dog, a tough-as-nails blue heeler named Buster, went absolutely berserk. He threw himself against the porch screen, snarling and snapping at the darkness. "Hush up, you damn fool," Pop grumbled from his rocking chair, though I noticed his grip tighten on his cane. Probably just a bobcat. "It sounded weird for a bobcat," I said, peering into the gloom. The porch light barely cut through the night, but for a second, I thought I saw eyes. Not the reflective green or yellow you usually see in animals. These reflected red, bright crimson red, low to the ground. The next morning is when things got weird. I went out to the coop to collect eggs. The chickens were agitated, clucking wildly and huddled in the corner. When I looked into the nesting boxes, I found one of the hens lying on the straw. At first glance, I thought it had died of old age or maybe the cold, though it was mid-July. I reached out to pick it up, and I nearly dropped it. It was light, impossibly light. It felt like I was holding a handful of dry leaves and feathers. I turned the bird over. There was no blood, no gore, no signs of a fox or coyote attack. The bird was perfectly intact, but it was empty. The skin was pulled tight against the bones, papery and brittle. The eyes were sunken so deep into the skull they were just dark pits. It looked like it had been dead for 10 years in a desert, mummified by the sun. But I had seen this bird alive and pecking yesterday evening. "Pop!" I yelled, running back to the house with the dried-out husk in my hand. He looked at the bird, his face paling beneath his weathered tan. He didn't say a word. He just took it from me, walked to the burn barrel, threw it in, and lit a match. "Disease," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Some kind of blight. Keep the coop locked tight tonight, Jack." That night, the heat was suffocating. I left my bedroom window cracked open to catch a breeze. Around 2 a.m., I woke up. I didn't know why at first, but then I heard it. Purring. It was coming from directly beneath my window, on the porch roof. But like the yowling, this wasn't right. A normal cat's purr is rhythmic, soothing. This sounded like a wet rattle, a jagged intake of breath through fluid-filled lungs. It was loud, too loud for a house cat. It vibrated against the siding of the house. I crept to the window and looked through the screen. Moonlight washed over the shingles, and there it was. It was sitting on its haunches, staring out towards the barn. It looked like a cat superficially. It had pointed ears, a tail, and fur, but the proportions were all wrong. Its body was elongated, stretched out like taffy. The fur was patchy, revealing gray, scabrous skin underneath. It was gaunt, its ribs visible through the mange,
yet its belly was distended and round, sloshing as it shifted weight. As if sensing my gaze, it turned its head. It didn't turn its body, just the neck. It twisted around nearly 180 degrees. I froze. The face was feline, but the snout was too short, almost flat, and the mouth was slightly open, revealing rows of needle-thin, translucent teeth. It stared at me with those red, reflective eyes, and for a second, I swear it smiled. The skin around its mouth pulled back way too far, reaching almost to its ears. Then, with a movement that was too fluid, too fast to track, it leapt from the roof to the ground, a drop of 15 feet, and landed silently. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat there with my grandfather's revolver, listening to the crickets, praying I didn't hear that wet, rattling purr again. But I had no idea that the chicken was just an appetizer. The thing was thirsty, and it was just getting started.
The next 2 days passed in a haze of paranoia. I tried to tell Pop what I saw, but he shut me down. City imagination, he called it. But I saw him checking the locks on the doors 3 times a day. I saw him loading the old double-barreled shotgun and leaving it by the back door for coyotes. He knew something was out there, but he was from a generation that didn't talk about monsters. They just tried to survive them. The heat wave intensified. The air was thick enough to chew, and the farm felt like it was baking. The creek beds were drying up, which felt ironically fitting considering what was happening. On the 3rd evening, Buster went missing. Usually, the dog never left Pop's side, especially with the strange scents in the air. But when I whistled for him at dinner time, the yard was silent. "He's probably chasing a rabbit," Pop said, spooning stew into his mouth, his hand trembling slightly. "He'll be back." But he wasn't back by sunset, and he wasn't back by midnight. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight and the revolver. "I'm going to look for him," I told Pop. "Jack, don't," he whispered, his voice sounding older than I'd ever heard it. "Don't go out there in the dark." "It's Buster, Pop. I can't leave him." I stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled metallic, like old pennies and ozone. The beam of my flashlight cut through the humidity, illuminating dust motes dancing in the dark. "Buster! Here, boy!" Silence. Not even the crickets were chirping tonight. I walked toward the barn. The cattle were restless, shifting and lowing in their pen. Their eyes were wide, rolling in panic. They smelled a predator. I circled around the back of the barn, near the old tractor shed. That's when I saw the drag marks. Something had been dragged through the dirt, a heavy weight leaving a wide furrow. I followed the trail. It led under the crawl space of the shed. I crouched down, shining the light into the darkness. 2 red orbs flashed back at me. Then came a hiss. It wasn't a cat hiss. It sounded like a high-pressure valve being released. "Get out of there," I shouted, firing a shot into the dirt to scare whatever it was. The creature scrambled. I saw a flash of gray, hairless skin and long, multi-jointed limbs spider-crawling backward deeper into the shadows. It moved with sickening speed, scuttling up the inside wall of the shed and disappearing through a hole in the roof. I turned my attention back to what it had been guarding. Buster? I crawled in, dragging the bundle out. I fell to my knees in the dirt, bile rising in my throat. It was Buster, or it used to be. The dog was deflated. That's the only word for it. Just like the chicken, he was completely desiccated. His skin was shrink-wrapped around his skeleton. His fur was brittle. He looked like a rug that had been thrown over a frame of bones. There wasn't a drop of moisture left in him. I rolled him over. On his neck, right over the jugular, were 2 puncture wounds. But they weren't clean bites. The flesh around them was shredded, and there was a strange, translucent slime coating the fur, rapidly drawing into a crust. I buried him right there. I couldn't let Pop see him like that. It would have killed him. When I got back to the house, I locked the door and shoved a chair under the handle. Pop was sitting in the living room, the shotgun across his lap. "He's gone, isn't he?" Pop asked. Yeah, he's gone. Was he dry? I looked at my grandfather. Yes. How did you know? Pop sighed, a long, rattling breath. My daddy told me stories about the wither cat. Said it comes every 40 years or so when the drought gets bad. Said it drinks the life because the land has none left to give. It's not a cat, Pop. I saw it. It's got too many joints in its legs. It's huge. It takes the shape it needs to get close. Cats are curious. People let cats in. Animals hesitate before attacking a cat. It's a mimic, a devil in a fur coat. We sat in silence for an hour. Then the power went out. The hum of the refrigerator died. The porch light flickered and died. The farm was plunged into absolute pitch blackness. And then the scratching started. It wasn't on the door, it was on the walls, all around us. It sounded like sandpaper on wood, frantic and fast. It was testing the perimeter. Then a heavy thump on the roof. It knows we're in here, I whispered, gripping the revolver so hard my knuckles turned white. It's done with the livestock, Pop said grimly. Cows take too long to bring down. It wants something easier, something that trapped itself in a box. We heard the sound of shingles being ripped up. It was digging. The chimney, I realized with a jolt of terror. Pop, the fireplace. We had boarded up the fireplace years ago to stop drafts, just using a piece of plywood. As we stared at the hearth, a fine stream of soot trickled down from the flue. Then came the sound. It was magnified by the chimney, echoing into the living room like a diesel engine idling. The plywood cover bowed inward. Something was pushing against it. The sound of the plywood cracking was like a gunshot in the silent room. "Get back!" I yelled, shoving Pop behind the heavy oak armchair. The purring stopped, replaced by a chittering sound, like teeth clacking together rapidly. The plywood bowed again, the nails screeching as they were forced out of the brickwork. Snap! One corner of the board broke loose. Through the gap, a limb shot out. It was gray, hairless, and impossibly long. It groped blindly into the room, the claws, 3 inches long and curved like scythes, hooking into the rug. It wasn't a paw. It looked like a hand, a distorted, 4-fingered human hand with extra knuckles, fused with the anatomy of a beast. I fired. The revolver kicked in my hand. The bullet struck the limb and a spray of black, viscous fluid hit the floor. The creature screamed. It was a sound I'll never forget. It started as a feline yowl and morphed into a human-like shriek of agony. It yanked the limb back up the chimney. "Is it dead?" Pop wheezed. "No," I said, reloading with shaking hands. "I just pissed it off." For a moment there was silence. Then we heard the scampering across the roof again. It was moving to the other side of the house. "The attic vent," Pop said. "The screen is rusted through." Before I could move, we heard the crash from upstairs, glass shattering, wood splintering. It was inside. "Kitchen, now," I ordered. The kitchen had the only door with a deadbolt and no easy way in from the ceiling. We retreated, slamming the heavy kitchen door and locking it. I pushed the refrigerator in front of it. Pop leveled the shotgun at the door. We could hear it moving through the house. It didn't walk, it flowed. We heard the heavy thuds of it jumping from furniture to floor, the click-clack of its claws on the hardwood. It was sniffing, hunting. It stopped right outside the kitchen door. We held our breath. I could hear Pop's heart rattling in his chest. The doorknob slowly turned. It knew how to use doorknobs. The lock held, but the knob rattled violently. Then the weight of the beast slammed against the wood. The refrigerator groaned, shifting an inch across the linoleum. "Jack," Pop whispered, "look." He pointed to the gap beneath the door. 2 appendages were sliding underneath. They were flat, boneless looking, feeling around for an obstruction. And behind them, pressed to the floor gap, was a face. I saw one wide, unblinking red eye staring up at me from the crack.
"Open the door," a voice said. It wasn't a voice, it was a mimicry of sounds stitched together to form words. It sounded like my voice, but recorded on a warped tape and played back slowly. "Jack, let me in. Thirsty." "Go to hell," I screamed, losing my composure. "Thirsty, so dry." The creature threw itself against the door again. The wood splintered near the hinges. The refrigerator slid another foot. One more hit and it would be in. "Pop, get ready," I said, aiming at the center of the door. "I love you, son," Pop said. The beast roared, a sound of pure hunger, and slammed into the door a third time. The frame gave way. The door flew open, knocking the refrigerator aside. In the beam of my flashlight, the nightmare stood revealed. It was hunched over, standing on its hind legs, nearly 6 feet tall. Its body was a grotesque mockery of a cat, emaciated, with ribs protruding like knives. Its front limbs hung down to its knees, tipped with those terrible hands. But the face was the worst, the jaw unhinged, dropping down to its chest, revealing a gullet that pulsed with anticipation. It lunged. Pop pulled the trigger. Boom! The double-barrel shotgun flash-blinded me. The sound was deafening in the small kitchen. The shot hit the creature square in the chest at point-blank range. It didn't bleed red. It exploded in a shower of dust and black slime. It was thrown backward into the hallway, crashing into the grandfather clock. It thrashed on the floor, screeching, a high-pitched whistling sound like a kettle boiling over. It tried to stand, but its chest was a ruin of black ichor and exposed bone. I stepped forward and emptied the rest of the revolver into it. 5 shots. It convulsed once, twice, and then began to evaporate. It didn't die like an animal. As it lay there, its body seemed to lose cohesion. The flesh turned to gray mist, the bones crumbling into ash. Within seconds, the hallway was empty, save for a pile of gray dust and a foul, coppery smell that made my eyes water. We didn't sleep. We sat in the kitchen until the sun came up. When daylight finally broke, we went outside. The farm was decimated. 3 of the cows were dead in the field, drained dry, just like Buster. The camp barn cats were gone. Pop sold the farm a week later. He's in an assisted living facility now in the city. He doesn't talk about that night. He just sits by the window, watching the birds, making sure they don't look too thin. But here's why I'm telling you this. Here's why I'm writing this from a motel room with the chain on the door. I thought we killed it. I saw it turn to dust. But yesterday, I unpacked my bag at my new apartment. I found a scratch on the leather of my suitcase, 3 deep grooves. And last night, while I was trying to sleep, I heard a sound from the ventilation duct above my bed. It was faint, but unmistakable. Purr. It sounded wetter this time, stronger. I don't think we killed it. I think we just destroyed a vessel. It's not an animal. It's a drought given form, and it followed me. I'm gonna check the vent now. I have a knife and a lighter. If you don't hear from me again, and you see a stray cat with red eyes, run. Just run.